back to the Tranquili-Tease. I'm your host, Marina Mars, and I am overwhelmed with joy with welcoming you back to this podcast and into this brand new year of 2021. So, in the spirit of the new year, I would love to talk about what happens when we feel stuck, right? If we feel stuck because maybe we're just a little bit less dedicated, maybe we're a little bit intimidated by a goal, maybe there's a career move you're a little bit unsure of. Now's the best time to discuss it. Really, any time is the best time to discuss it, but especially right now with the power of the new year. But before we dive in, please be sure to click the subscribe button followed by the little bell for notifications if you are hanging out with me on YouTube, or go ahead and click follow if you are on any other podcast streaming site or IGTV. I am so excited to dive right in. And sure, some things are inherently going to be different, because we are dealing with a COVID world still, right? We are 9 months in. We thought that we were told, only a couple weeks, a little bit of quarantine here and there should be good. But it turns out this is a new lifestyle, right? So that means that, some things have changed. But that being said, there are some fundamental things that have not changed. And one of those things is survival of the fittest, right? It remains a fact of life that we can't escape from. The thing is, failure is about staying down, not being knocked over, right? So failure is a lot about quitting and not continuing forward on the journey that you set out just because you got stuck in some sort of blockage, right? This is where I believe, my friend, you should not be quitting, but you should be pivoting. So what do I mean by this? What even is a pivot? Well, it's all about flexible thinking, and it's all about asking yourself, okay, well, if getting from point A to point B doesn't look exactly the way I thought it would, is there another way to get to point B, or is there an alternative to point B? Is there a point C that still checks all the boxes as to why we're here in the first place? It still checks the boxes in terms of, your goals and being in alignment with them. It just might look a little bit different. So there's nothing flaky about changing your mind or changing course either. I know that sometimes that can be a really difficult mental block for a lot of people to get over, but you have to recognize it does not make you flaky. It makes you adaptable. It makes you a flexible person to be able to make those kinds of shifts. So what is it that makes us human, right? It's such an interesting question. And by the way, I'm just curious, what is it that makes us human? Go ahead and leave a comment in the YouTube comment section below, or if you're on Instagram, please leave a comment here. Any of the other podcast streaming sites, head to one of those two sites. Let's talk about it. I'm super curious as to what you think. But I have two main answers that I always come to. Number one, the fact that we're storytellers, the fact that we can even put other concepts around a core concept, right, and make this kaleidoscopic understanding to be able to approach a topic. That's kind of something that makes us human. But the other thing is that we are experts at adaptation. And I don't just mean like, okay, so we can figure out how to survive in any climate, even though we have, or we can figure out how to live on other planets, even though we're pretty much figuring that out now. It really comes down to, no matter what, we always find a way, even if it's weird, even if it's slightly immoral, even if we haven't figured out how we feel about it. The fact remains that we're usually pretty good at figuring anything out. Even rocket science was figured out by a human, right? AI, everything we think is just so far out of our personal reach was at the end of the day made by a human. So adaptation is what keeps us alive. Don't be afraid of it. And don't let anyone tell you that it makes you flaky just because you're going to change your mind when you encounter new data. Because that's actually what makes you a smart person. That's what makes you a critical thinker. And that's really important. The thing is, you just don't want to get attached to details, right? You're just going to be damned by that expectation, by that heaviness and the weight of expecting things that may or may not necessarily fall into place. But here's the thing. Sometimes we view failure as the details not looking like what we expected, right? We become blind to our own success because we're too narrow-minded about what that success might look like, right? So practicing gratitude is going to be key. It's going to be absolutely crucial in helping you navigate away from this sort of tragic mindset, right? Again, you could have a success right in front of your face, and just because you called it by another name or you thought it was going to be yellow instead of blue, now you're blind to it, when in reality you're already there. So don't beat yourself up about the details. It's okay to adapt. Okay, so what do these pivots actually look like? Well, let's start from the movement perspective, and then we'll move kind of to a more broad perspective. So movement pivots. Let's say that you're injured. Let's say you had a really awesome event, or you were in the middle of creating some cool project, cool art, and then you got an injury and you could no longer move the way you thought you were able to. So now it just feels like the whole project might be thrown away. Okay, I understand, especially like as a dancer, if you have like a bum foot, right? Like you just injured your ankle, it's going to be really hard to dance. And I totally get that. But you still have so many other body parts, and you still have so many other tools at your disposal to be able to continue to dance or move or express yourself, even if you don't have your ankle. So let's say maybe you took a lot of time off and now you feel really rusty, right? And it's kind of hard to figure out where to pick back up and how to move forward. It's a great time to pivot back into fundamentals, right? So pivoting doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and do something new and exciting and never done. Like you don't have to innovate and reinvent the entire wheel. Pivoting just means change direction. So if you had, done a pivot maybe 6 months ago, and then it's like, oh, you know what? Turns out this path isn't for me, or like, I got injured, I took some time off, these things happen. Let's just go back to square one. I liked what we were doing before. That is an awesome pivot. Pivot doesn't mean it has to go somewhere new. You're just experimenting or, changing to a different direction. Let's say you're uninspired and you need a pivot because of where you are just kind of feels like the waters are a little bit murky and just, you're not really sure what to do with it. This is an excellent time to pivot to a new style of dance, perhaps. So instead of going back to fundamentals, going back in time, or focusing on other body parts, maybe we're just focusing on completely different areas of thought, of creative expression. And this can be really exciting and super scary and terrifying. I totally understand, because when COVID and everything went down starting in March of 2020, I really didn't want to enter into the online space of performing burlesque specifically, so I did a massive pivot over to learning a lot more about shuffling and a lot of general footwork dance styles, and it honestly has changed my life, and it's one of the best pivots that I have made. And that isn't to say that I'm done with burlesque or I'm done with pole or I'm not doing any of those things. That just means that in the moment of I had a blockage. I had no way to creatively express myself, and what I was doing was not working. I pivoted to do something that was working with exactly the situation I was in. Now, that's not to say that I won't pivot back to being able to perform more live stuff in the future. It just might look a little bit different next time, right? Maybe I'm just going to incorporate some of the shuffling I know. Maybe it just gives me a deeper appreciation for burlesque in and of itself. And so, I keep those separate. Whatever it might be, you have to be open-minded with where the pivot might take you. And that's what's so exciting about it. So let's move into examples of life pivots instead of movement-based pivots. So another example, like I mentioned with the pandemic, I had switched from showgirling into also coaching people as from a career standpoint rather than just like a passion standpoint, right? This was something that was, I made a list of what it was that I loved about showgirling. I made a list about what it was I missed about performing. So my passion and my profession. And on top of that, what other kind of skills come up when I took my signature strengths test. So if you haven't heard of one of those, go ahead and check the comment or the description section of this video. It'll definitely be in there. Or feel free to shoot me an email, Marina Mars, xoxo@hotmail.com, and I will make sure I send that this signature strength finder test to you. But basically, once I had all this information and I kind of took a look at it, I realized the best pivot for me was to still be able to, do the hustle and creatively express myself, but instead find a way to help people in a way that the world needed it the most. And for me, I felt that that was helping people find a way to bring in income and find a way to also um, express themselves during a time where there's no one, like you're just screaming at walls, right? Because we're all kind of stuck at home a little bit more. One other final example that one of my favorite business coaches mentioned to me, she talked about the story of Plato. And by Plato, I don't mean the philosopher, but I mean that super fun ooey gooey stuff that we love to play with our hands. So Play-Doh used to be used to clean soot off of walls way back in the day when we, were still burning coal, and there was a lot of soot to be cleaned up. But once we kind of transitioned into a different power source, into a little bit more clean energy, then the inventor ended up figuring out that because he had someone who he was close with, who was an educator, a child educator, it was the story goes that the child educator was just playing with this stuff and was like, oh my goodness, my children would be able to learn so much from this. They'd be able to, actually play and create the things that we're learning about rather than just keeping it in their heads. Because again, this was back before the internet, before a lot of the modern conveniences we have today. And I just to think that that sort of pivot from being a cleaning product to being an educational resource is just phenomenal and wildly inspiring. And so you can do the same with any sort of, blockage that you're having as well. So please tell me about your experience with life in the past year. What kind of things have you felt like you had to quit, whether it was like you were forced to, or, it just kind of wasn't working out anymore? Whatever it might be. What is it that you have had to quit that you would love to pivot into something, but you're just not sure about what it is? Or maybe you have pivoted and you're really excited about it. Regardless of where you're at in your journey, I would really love to hear about it. Please leave me a comment and tell us all about it. Don't be shy at all. And on a final note, if you haven't already signed up for my newsletter, the Martian Gazette, I highly recommend it because it is a free sporadic dose of love, beauty, and pleasure. And you can do so, you can sign up for that list by going to marinamars.com. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, lovelies. It brings me so much joy to be back and to be speaking with you. So I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. XOXO.